I've got.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tabernacle Township Committee meeting for April 9th, 2018. Thank you for attending, and at this time, please stand for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine notice. This meeting is called pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. This meeting on April 9th, 2018 was included in the list of notices sent to the central record, Burlington Town Times, and Courier Post, posted on the bulletin board in Town Hall, and has remained continuously posted as required notices under the statute. In addition, a copy of the notice has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. We have roll call. Ms. Brown. Mr. Franson.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Yates.
Here.
Mayor Barton.
Present. Okay, public comment on agenda items only. If anyone has any comments on agenda items, please come forward, state your name, address. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor Barton. Good evening to everyone.
Sir, hang on one second. Sorry. It's supposed to be 70-some degrees on
Saturday.
what? Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, we went from winter to summer. Yay! Well, I can tell you, the birds don't like it. That's all I'm gonna say.
Tell you what, works harder than I don't like it.
No, I can understand that. All right, Stuart, we're good.
Okay, Stuart Brooks, Warden Meadow Road. I have two comments. One is regarding Resolution 2018-50, the general obligation bond. My question is, what things are we bonding for? And this relates to those things that already haven't been temporarily financed, which I believe are the last two ordinances on Exhibit A. Various heavy equipment that's noted in Ordinance 2017-8. Various road improvements, Ordinance 2017-10. And various equipment for the fire company, which is also listed under 2017-10. What is that stuff?
We will go into detail as we discuss this resolution.
Okay, the other question in particular is regarding the various road improvements. Of course, I'm interested in knowing whether Carranza is among those various road improvements.
We will do a review of 2014-6, 2015-3, 2015-10, 2017-8, 2017-10.
Okay, and will you also explain what the projected cost or the estimated cost of that bond is on an annual basis?
If Mr. Chairman can handle that, if not, we'll have to get it for a later date.
Okay.
No, well, actually, it's going to go up for a bid, so we don't have a rate yet. This
Right.
is just doing the,
Are you anticipating a rate? Do you have a range?
because it's the lowest bidder, so the rates are low, like around 2s and 3s, but we won't know until they bid.
Okay. Thank you. My other comments have to do with the next resolution on the field services agreement with Woodland Township. It's 2018-51. In general, it seems to me that consideration of this agreement is premature. I think this is the matter that was addressed in closed session at the last meeting or the meeting before. That was done at the last minute. It wasn't on the agenda. It happened because it was deemed needed to happen. And there's so much data as far as numbers that just hasn't ever been explained to the public to determine whether or not this is a good deal to Tabernacle or not. For instance, what's Woodland's 2017 court revenues? We know what ours are, it's in the budget. We know what our budget costs are. Have you read Woodland's shared services agreement with Bass River? What's their deal like? How much does Woodland pay to Bass River now? How does that compare to the $1,200 of rent that this agreement calls for us to pay to Woodland? The term I see is 5 years. Do you anticipate extra costs above and beyond the salaries and wages or operating expenses that are currently in the budget? Those amount to about $91,500 currently, but if this agreement goes in place, are there going to be additional costs? And of course, with the rent, that's an additional $1,440. I guess the bottom line is I don't understand. It seems as if the committee is rushing to get this done. None of those numbers have been discussed publicly at all. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Mrs. Brooks?
Music playing.
Yeah, Mrs. Brooks, I was just turning my phone
That's
on.
okay.
so-
Probably everybody should start closing their phones.
I'll turn it off.
Good evening. Fran Brooks, Moores Meadow Road. I have one question about the bill list. The bill list that appeared on the website, which we appreciate, is dated April 2nd. There's a I think a $38,000 difference between the April 2nd version and the April 9th. What does that correspond to?
We actually did an updated list, so the bill list that appeared on Friday was your draft version, so it was updated. A few more bills were added, so we just replenished the whole thing. It is on the website as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just as a follow-up to Stuart's questions about the shared service agreement with Woodland, will you specifically be discussing in that portion of the meeting how much revenue is going to be anticipated from Woodland's fees or fines, violations and fines? And I'm just trying to go through my questions here, that some of which he took from me. I know there's a $7,500 difference between what was encumbered in 2017 and what's proposed in our this is with Tabernacle 2018 budget. This additional $7,600, how accurate is this assessed estimate, and what is it based on? Because it's a 5-year contract, and so are we going to be, if costs go above those $7,600, is there flexibility if you should go ahead with this, which I tend to agree with him, not just because he's my husband, but it just seems like you're rushing through this, because at the last 2 years ago, you were discussing moving court to the ESB, and that sort of died, and so now suddenly this is rearing its head, and there's just been no public discussion about it. So it would be good to understand the numbers involved in this, because this is a 5-year contract, and I don't want to see this turn into another shamang, actually. And is there really a financial benefit for Tabernacle? And how many hours are going to be added to Margaret's work and any other employees, township employees, because of this shared service agreement, and it being a 5-year agreement? And were there any other townships that you looked at, you examined, or spoke with regarding a shared services agreement other than Woodland? So it'd be good to hear about in detail the finances, what financial benefit we get from it, and also more about Woodland's relationship with Bass River, because Bass River was handling its court, and that has changed obviously, and how long they worked with Bass River and why they're suddenly coming with us. So it would be good if you could go into those details, Mayor, committee. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Okay, close the public portion, approval of the bills.
I can't shut it off. Sorry, Joe. We're standing, we're both standing. Sam, you might have to sit in the front row for public portion. Sorry, Joe.
Have a motion to approve the bills.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Martin?
Yes. New business, resolution 2018-50, authorizing the issuance and sale of general obligation bonds, and this is a combination of ordinance 2014-6, 2015-3, 2015-10, and 2017-8, and 2017-10. Terry, you want to, let's get a motion and a second, then we get into discussion.
So moved. Second.
Okay.
I can run through what each one of the items were, as each one was, and then Terry can go on to explain the rest of that. 2014-6 was $450,000 towards roadway and related drainage improvements, and improvements to various municipal buildings, including the Pepper House, Community Center, and other buildings.
And of that, how much has been done and how much do you have left to do?
14's, just verify this.
You just hit the big ones.
Okay, the building, the 400,000 for the buildings is still we haven't spent any portion of that. The 450,000, I believe we've spent. We have around 300,000 left for drainage issues, which we'll discuss later on when we talk about Corinza Road.
Okay.
And the next one is 215-3, which is 700,000 for the acquisition of a Class A pump truck. Less than 4312. That is the balance that we have left in that. We did 108,000 down payment on. We have 592,000 left that will be rolled into this. Next one is 1510. And that was 1.23 million put aside for road improvements, which that majority of that has been spent. That was mainly, what we do for Patty Grover and that and the rest of that road. Portion of Fayette Road. What else did we do that year? How many of them?
So that's 2015-10?
Yeah.
I don't see anything in here for roads.
2015-10, second page on the back side. $1,230,000 towards roads, $700,000 towards improvements to buildings, which include the Tucker House, Public Works, Town Hall, Community Center, Firehouse, the Town Hall, which we have spent nothing out of that. Zach's acquisition of a utility truck, acquisition of a medium dump truck and a large dump truck, which are trucks 14, 15, and 16.
So the building improvements, how much of that is still open that we haven't done?
We have not spent any of the bond money towards building improvements. We've worked out of current capital on all the improvements we've done so far.
Okay. So that's still available.
That's still available. $17,800 was for various heavy equipment, and that is for one dump truck and one hook lift. The dump truck's been delivered, the hook lift should be sometime this month. And $17,10 is the $900,000 towards roads and $130,000 towards various equipment for the fire company. The SCBA's were purchased on that, they've been delivered and been paid for, so that $130,000 has been spent. In fact, they were just delivered the other day, a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
And that 900 for roads, do we know where we're going with that?
That was initially earmarked for Powell Place Road. And then there was lengthy discussion last year about Carranza Road and a local funding for that. And so nothing has been decided at this point in time.
Okay. And since you're talking about Carranza, just for the public's information, Doug has scheduled a meeting with the mayor of Chemung and the business administrator to talk about the condition of Carranza Road. And they did acknowledge that it needs attention. They have other priorities that they're looking at, and we're in the process of scheduling a meeting with the senator in the 8th district, Dawn Adiego. So the reason we're going with Dawn Adiego, Senator Dawn Adiego, is their side of the road is in the 8th district, our side of the road is in the 9th district. We feel we have our side covered through this bond and grants, and we're willing to do our side. We just need a commitment from them that they'll do their side and what that timeline is. So they want to meet with Senator Adiego and see, because there's a state facility at the end of that road, whether there's anything the state could do to help out. So that meeting is in the process of being scheduled. And once we have that meeting scheduled, we have some information from the senator and hopefully a better commitment from Chemung, that it is good news that they do recognize that the road needs attention, but they do have some other roads that are in as bad or maybe worse shape that they're addressing at this time.
Mayor, I have one correction. The 2014, the amount that was left was not 200,000. That is in the 2015 balance that was left. It means that 14 we did Sewer Place Road with.
Okay.
Apologize for that.
That's okay. Any questions from the committee on Mr. Kramer's report?
The meeting that you're setting up with Chemung, is Mr. Lee included in that? Because I do believe you appointed Mr. Lee to look into that.
Yeah, it actually was an opportunity that we happened to be at the same location at the same time. But when we scheduled a meeting with the senator. Actually, the Chemung mayor will have to schedule that meeting because she's their senator, not ours. We'll make sure you get included, Steve.
Okay, great. Just for the record, I did have a lengthy discussion with the deputy mayor in Chemung Township, and he didn't mention anything at the time of meeting with Senator Diego, but I think it would be good to not only include Senator Diego in that conversation, but also Senator Connors as well, so they have an awareness of what's going on, because it's not just Senator Diego's decision, it's got to come from a different source, so it's important to have as many folks involved in that discussion as possible. It's my recommendation.
Not only to think about it, that road leads to the monument, which we have a celebration every year.
Mm-hmm.
We have people from all over showing up, people showing up from Mexico, and it's kind of a disgrace they come down that road to go to that monument. So hopefully that if we put it to the state that way, maybe we'll get a little assistance.
Mm-hmm. It is a big event.
That was a nice way of putting it. I mean, disgrace.
It is a disgrace.
That's a good word for it, actually, to be honest.
Any other comments? Rick?
Yeah, but
Joe? Anything further?
No, I'm fine.
Deputy Mayor?
No, sir.
Okay. Roll call?
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Terry,
Also,
Just add real quickly, and it kind of goes towards the question that Stuart had asked. On page 3 is that we don't know what our principal payments are, interest payments are going to be, but that is the schedule of our principal payments on page 3 there.
okay.
So, and actually all of the projects that we're bonding had relatively small useful life period, so the average is 11 years, so we're paying this bond back 11 years. That's why these payments are at $400,000.
And just for the record, the amounts that Terry's talking about, 2019 would be $380,000, 2020, $435,000, 21, $445,000, 22, $450,000, 23, $450,000, 24, $450,000, 25, 26, $450,000, both of those, 27 and 28, $460,000, and 29, $470,000.
So that'll actually be paid off before our 2013 bonds, which are paid off in 2033.
Could you repeat that? Would you repeat that again? I'm sorry, it's just, there's a lot of numbers. I'm sorry to speak from
No,
the...
I said this bond will actually be paid off because of its low useful life before our 2013 bonds, which are paid off in 2033.
Okay. Thank you, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mayor. It's just hard
You
to...
want me to repeat those numbers, Mrs. Brooks?
Well, I'll just ask for a copy, a copy of them, okay? That would just be easier.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Okay, resolution 2018-51, authorizing the Township of Tabernacle to enter into a shared service agreement with Woodland Township for the provision of municipal court services. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, discussion?
We have a lot of questions about this at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah.
What do you want to know? Or where do you want to start? You're the chairman.
Okay, well, we have Mr. Kramer, since he's our administrator, review the process that we went through, Doug. And I know, Stephen, you are intricately involved in this also. And some of the things that we looked at. And I think in that, Doug, you have to talk about this building not being suited for court, and someday it's probably going to require a major commitment from the township that we were to continue to use this building for court. And go over the history too, Doug, because we did look at this before. When Stephen was the mayor, we looked at this, and we're talking with women, and they went to Bass River as a result of our conversation. or it probably would have happened back then.
Well,
The floor is yours.
we started a number of years ago on trying to do a number of different things with our court. We've entertained and pursued for a little while a shared court with Pemberton Borough, which never materialized past the discussion stage. Although we may have introduced a resolution, I think, to enter into that discussion. When in Mayor Lee's first term, we talked about a regional court with Chemung, Southampton, Woodland, and us, and pursued that for a while. And is that when Woodland decided to go to Bass River? That was where that discussion started. And it centers around a number of things. To meet the current court standards, this building, built in 1875, just doesn't meet the current standards of what it is. We do the best we can. We put the improvements we can in. But there's stages where it's going to take a large influx of capital to update this building to meet the standards, from everything from an elevator onto the second floor to bulletproof glass and doorway and security, additional security measures that a second floor courtroom adds to the expense versus a first floor courtroom. So we've looked at taking on shared service here to increase the inflow of capital or funds to fund that, and we've looked at moving elsewhere to reduce that projected cost over time. We have been close a couple times. It has not worked out for different reasons. We had some discussion with Chemung last year. Mr. Lee was part of that also. We had some discussion with them and talked about what they could do, and Medford Lakes was with Medford at one time and then moved back to their own courtroom, and to be honest, made a better deal than we were willing to make with Chemung to get Chemung there. So the deal got to a point for us that it no longer made any sense. The whole purpose of a shared service is so both of us gain some economies of scale and each of us get a little savings here and there. Some of our savings will come in the ability not to have to spend capital money on this building. Some of it will come for Woodland in their ability to develop some income from their courtroom that they have not been for a while. We look to generate some additional funds to try to cover our costs. If it's a home run for either one of us, it doesn't work. So both of us will get some things out of this. We will have some additional expense based on the court load. And all of this is dependent on the approval of the Judge Bookbinder and the Broughton County court system making those approvals. So our anticipation is that we hope that they approve that, and that based on the dollar amount that they took in last year and previous years, we hope to do at least as well as they did last year, if not a little better, given that the court will be closer both for the barracks that serves it and also for the residents that go into Bass River. So we hope to gain that. And that's pretty much where we are. Mayor Lee and Committeeman Franzen were down and met and had some good discussion and put together what we think is a good compromise on both sides to try to service the court in as efficient and cost-effective manner as we can. They have a facility that already meets all the standards that are current right now, and it's sitting there being unused. And they have an arrangement with Bass River that is, we do a little bit better in that we keep all the local fines also, where Bass River doesn't. They just keep the ticket money at this point. So we're trying to cover a little more of our costs. We're trying to not spend capital money on this building unnecessarily, and trying to keep it within the manpower that we have. That final manpower will be determined by the court, and we hope to keep the staff we have and be able to service the facility where the daily operations will stay in town, in Tabernacle. Only court days will be in Woodland Township. Morristown has a similar arrangement with Cinnaminson and has gotten the approval of the county court system, so we're hoping that we're not a new concept and that they'll approve us to do roughly the same thing. Deputy Mayor, do you have any more to add?
I have a comment, but one thing that was kind of coincidence is Judge Downey, who was here at our last meeting, who we appointed as our judge, is also the judge of Morristown, has experienced the same thing with merging the courts with Cinnaminson and Morristown. So she's very familiar with putting the courts together. But I'll defer to Mr. Franzen first. Good comments.
Yeah, two things I really like to amplify. One is that it's not a done deal. We still have to have the approval of the county on this. And they will, scrutinize this proposal and make sure that it looks good for both townships. So there's a further review of it. The other thing is it's our anticipation that the revenue that comes in from this will pretty much cover the cost of doing it. Maybe, I think Doug was alluding to this, a little bit of a surplus. It's really hard to tell how that'll ultimately wash out. But given the fact that we are facing major renovations to this building, as Doug did point out, this makes a lot of sense to go ahead and have those renovations already paid for and in place over in Woodland Township. Thank you.
Not only does this have to be approved by the county, but Woodland Township has to approve it also. We just have to be meeting first. So we're the first ones to approve this agreement publicly. We don't have an agreement until we vote on it. But my point is that Woodland Township did discuss it in public at their last meeting, and we've had discussions tonight, but also we're the first ones to approve the agreement, and they will have to do that. Two folks that have to say yes before this happens, as Mr. Franzen had mentioned. One is the county, the other one's Woodland Township.
Stephen, I'd like to thank you. You kind of carried this torch for a long time trying to make this happen. And Rick also for serving on the committee and getting us to this point. And there's more than just the renovations that have to take place in this building. It's convenient to our residents to come to this building. If you've ever been to this building on court day, whether it's the morning session, which is once a month, or the afternoon session, which is once a month, you can't find a parking spot, number one. This place is jammed pretty much solid. They use the same bath facilities that our employees use and that the public use when they come here. We do have a lot of people that do come here to pay their taxes and do business, and it's a burden on them to come here during those 2 days. And it's a big wear and tear on this building. And this is a unique building. And as I go around the county, and I've been to every municipal building in Burlington County, we have a humble building compared to what most have. Most have separate facilities for their court, separate entrances, that they don't have to intermingle with the clerk, the deputy clerk, the tax collector. So I think it's a win in that way also. It's more convenient for our residents not to have it in this building, and to move it at a facility that can accommodate it better than we can.
We're actually one of the few courts in our area that does not have a shared agreement. And help me out here, Pete, if I miss one, but Lumberton and Southampton are together at this point. Is that correct? Or awaiting
I
approval?
think there have been ongoing discussions in that regard.
Bass River and Woodland, Medford, and Medford.
The administrator's shaking no.
No more. Medford stands on its own, and Medford Lake, so.
Oh, Chemung, I'm thinking of
Chemung.
Chemung. No, but Chemung.
There are a number of
Yeah.
successful shared service agreements throughout the county.
The moral of the story is that a lot of municipalities have done exactly what we've been trying to do for quite a while, and are always looking for opportunities. Like when Doug was talking earlier, I remember sitting with Mayor Young down, and we sat down at the Southampton building one night, and he wanted everything. Hey, like, wait a minute, it's not the way it's supposed to work. Shared services mean shared service, not a whole bunch of both. Anyway, that's all I've got now.
Thank you for your report. Roll call?
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Martin?
Yes. So we have a parade permit application for license for Urban Promise Ministries, Battle for Promise, which is May 12, 2018. Everything's in your packet. Have a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call?
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Questions? Any questions before we vote?
Oh, yeah, you have questions? I'm sorry.
How many people do they anticipate for this event? Any idea?
This is not the first year they've done this, right?
Yeah, they've done
many
this
years.
about 3 or 4 years.
And it varies depending on what the temperature's like.
Yes.
It all depends, if it's a gorgeous day, you'll have a decent amount, but I think last year it rained or was really cold or something, they
Yeah,
didn't,
they did not have a big event.
they didn't even have much, they didn't have, I don't know if they had anything. No.
Yeah, they may have canceled last year.
They did.
And is this one of those groups that blocks intersections and takes up the entire lane to hold up traffic, or are they going single file, two abreast?
There's a number of different routes with this event. They start at the middle school, and they head out in different directions. So it's not like it's a big race with a big group. It's sort of split and go. Some do a small, I guess it goes up, I don't remember the mileage, but they'll say.
There's a 14.3, there's a 30.1, there's a 41.3, there's 61.7 miles.
And
There's
they-
4 different
There's
directions.
4 different directions. They spend part of their time in town. They do use where the old house was torn down at Crickett's Mill Field, they use that as a rest stop for 2 of their legs. 2 different events start there, but we've never had a huge impact. The CERT normally provides some of the major intersection flagging for them. Has in the past. I'm going to assume John Lyons has not issued any complaint about it. I talked to Colonel Lowe this morning, he responded.
So it's, and of course, we're going to be streamlining these with the new ordinance that they're going to go to electronic for approval. But is the OEM coordinator involved in the review of all these?
Yes, yes. Brian Monahan is our RMC, reviews them. OEM reviews them. Sent to the rescue squad. Do you get? No. Depending on what the event, you may get some of them, but I don't get all of them. So for EMS services, so they're aware of that. And I usually see them at some point.
Okay, and we haven't heard any concerns from our OEM coordinator.
Brian, I heard back from Brian today, he was okay, and Colonel Law I spoke to this morning, and he didn't have any issues at this point.
We've had no issues in the past with,
I won't say that. The very first time when it sort of was a surprise on us, when the school approved it and nobody told us, yeah, it was a little, the second year it got much better, and it's been better since then.
well, I mean, I do believe everyone in the room understands where I'm coming from with this. I mean, it's not that I'm against this, but I'm also looking out for the safety of everyone. Because more than once, I have to say probably everybody in this room, you go to pass these cyclists, and they swerve out into the lane on you, forcing you to either hit your brakes or go all the way into the other lane to avoid them, which is a safety hazard. That's why I'm asking, is it 2 abreast? Are they leaving 15 seconds apart?
What they have done before is they leave as a group for whichever ride they're going on, and they start them all at different times. I think the long event may be a staggered event. But that's,
The reason I'm asking, Doug, is reviewing a lot of these roads that they're going to be going on, there's no shoulders.
no, and there's not large groups, or there hasn't been in the past.
Right.
And it's not the event like it was from Atlantic City a number of years ago, when they started closer to us and you had a large group, and then the second time they came through, they're spread out, so you have a few here and there, but not that. This is more of a ride event. This is how it's described. It's not quite as thinly done as the Pinelands Preservation event. That's a little thinner because first of all, they start in Vincenttown, and by the time they get to us, they're spread out pretty thin. So, as with any, if you're at the start, you're going to have a concentrated event at New Road for a short time. And in the past, CERT has taken care of the traffic control at that from the start. So you will have them coming out of Olson Middle School in a staggered group as a group.
So the CERT's coming to oversee this?
CERT has in the past.
Okay. No further questions?
Joe, if you would like, and I hear your concern about multiple riders in the road. And while this isn't a race, so there's no reason that they have to be 3, 4 abreast. And the bike lanes are actually made for one. I mean, if we could direct with Sean to let the applicant know that we don't want dual riding, we just want single lane riding.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
They have to follow the same laws as any vehicle. So they would have to, in order to comply with Title 39, they'd have to go in single file, one behind the other. No different than you trying to have 2 vehicles in a single lane travel. So there is an ability to ask them to just comply with the law, Title 39, and that would require them to travel in single file.
Okay. You okay with that, Joe? We'll have LaShawn direct them. You get them words, LaShawn? Title 39, single file, must comply with the law. Any further discussion? No. Okay, roll call.
Okay. Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes, with reluctance.
Mayor Parton?
Yes. Okay. Under new business, I have a discussion for special events ordinance, and Deputy Mayor Lee sits on our land development board. And Steve, I'd like to ask you to talk about an ordinance that you found in another municipality, and how you think that would be beneficial to Tabernacle Township.
One of the things that I've learned in this job is sitting and having some lengthy discussions with folks that sit in emergency service positions here in the town. And the person I talked to last Monday was Colonel Lowe, and I think he was in Virginia, New York, somewhere at the time. But in any event, Eucharist and Seneca graduation are probably two of our largest events we have here in town. Not to mention the tree light that continues to grow. And we don't have anything in writing that gives us a specific emergency preparedness plan for that event or for Seneca graduation. And there's general dialogue between the OEM office and between the church or between Seneca graduation, or Seneca in general. There is some discussion, but one of the things that the church has to do is every 4 years, they have to come to the LWC with a city plan to look at placement of rides and placement of the beer garden and whatnot. And what you're really doing is you're asking folks that are sitting on the land use board to talk about an event that maybe somebody else should be sitting and talking about. And what I mean by that is that the OEM office and public safety director that we're going to have a much more better understanding than the land use board, in my opinion, about making decisions that are going to affect the safety of the attendees of the events that are here in town. So one of the recommendations that Colonel Lowe had was that we look at an ordinance that was just passed by Chemung Township. And what the ordinance does is it outlines specifically a group that wants to have a special event. And you know, Joe just brought up a lot of really good points about this Pedal for Promise event that's going on, this parade permit. Does it really qualify as a parade permit? I'm not sure it does. But what this ordinance would do is essentially get the planning folks at the table with OEM and with public safety. And we can craft this however we want. But my thought was that we would have the administrator, the mayor, OEM, and public safety director sit at the table with whatever organization it was and say, okay, we need to know specifics and understand what the definitions are, what traffic and pedestrian management really means, public health management, emergency vehicle access, event management plan, insurance. A lot of this stuff we cover to an extent, but what this ordinance would do is streamline the process, whereas anybody that wanted to have a major event, they would have to sit at a table with our township and meet the specific guidelines in the ordinance. Is it cumbersome? It might be. But what it does is it brings the event planners and the township OEM department and public safety department at the table to essentially ask and answer questions that you just raised in an event that we're having for Pedal for Promise. So Pete, LaShawn, actually, I want to thank LaShawn for getting the draft from Chemung Township later on a Friday, as a matter of fact, or late in the day. Thank you for doing that, LaShawn. I got this to Pete, and Pete took a look at it. We can craft this however we want. We can talk about it now if you'd like. If you want to absorb it for 2 weeks or so, that's fine too. The concept behind this is to get the players at the table. And I want to thank Colonel Lowe for kind of pointing me in the right direction of where to go and to get some real questions answered. Just Pete, Jeff, comment?
Yeah, let me just add that I did look at the Chemung ordinance, and while this is based on that Shimon ordinance. I did redraft it substantially. I must say that I was not satisfied with the Shimon ordinance. I understood what its intents and purposes were mechanically, and I think I improved it, quite frankly, and I wasn't satisfied with that draft. So I would urge you to not look at the Shimon ordinance. I think that this is just a simple substitution of names, because it's not. So you want to look at it a little bit. I would indicate, first of all, the public will be interested in knowing it doesn't require a fee. We're looking for any kind of permit fee. So it's not in any way aimed at revenue generation. But essentially what it does is it requires a permit for special events as defined. A special event is defined as a race, protest, service, walkathon, fair, carnival, festival, show, exhibition, or other similar public event to be conducted within or partly within the Township of Tabernacle, where attendance by participants, spectators, and/or patrons is expected to be greater than 300 persons, and where the event or any part of it is to be held on public ground, a public park, in a public right-of-way, or on private ground where when the public is invited and/or the event is advertised. So it's only in that type of event would it be applicable. And then it goes on to require in those events essentially a management plan be submitted, which coordinates on all of the tenets of public safety and public coordination with the emergency service entities. And it requires insurance, and that's essentially it. So the goal is to require that coordination. I can glean that from the Shimon ordinance with public services, the Office of Emergency Management, not to burden these event promoters with a permit fee, and to just make sure that that plan is submitted, and to give the township's emergency services an ability to have input and/or approve, in fact, the way I wrote it, that plan that would be submitted. So it's a draft. It's out there for consumption and comment. When it's ready, we can have it introduced if the committee wants to move in that direction. The last thing I would do is reconcile it with the existing parade permit to make sure it's not redundant, potentially incorporate it. My suggestion would be that we roll it into one so that we're not looking at two different ordinances, and I certainly can do that at the direction of the committee. So that's
Did you
all
send a
I have.
copy of this to Courtney? The one that you did?
I did not, but I don't know if LaShawn did.
You did, okay, thanks, LaShawn.
Perfect sense what Mr. Lang just stated, combine the two, so we only have one.
We do have a fee for a parade permit, $75 right now for a parade permit.
So I could carve that out. I could indicate that for parades, it would be the $75, but, combine them so that we're only looking at one ordinance and not create some confusion, I think, otherwise. We could preserve, in essence, that distinction, but to the extent that they overlap, combine them and not have two separate ordinances.
Yeah, we didn't talk, when Courtney and I were talking last week, there wasn't any discussion about a fee for this. It was mainly to get the parties at the table.
If I could, this process that you outlined with the individuals who will be present is very, to talk about it, is very similar to the process that's been used for the Christmas tree lighting. We've had all these people involved, and surprisingly, we actually had an OEM plan come out of that, and I can tell you that it works, and it works well in the instant, where it's now being done. So to extend this to some of the larger groups that are also meeting, to me, makes a lot of sense. I think it works, and it's a good idea, and I think we need, to just go over it again for another 2 weeks, and then maybe come back and say, yeah, let's nail it down and go forward. I don't think we need to jump into it today, but I like the idea.
I don't think it's over-regulation when you're talking about events where 300 plus people are expected. Obviously, there's traffic, there's pedestrian, there's sanitary sewer, there's coordination, there's access issues at any event in that regard. So I don't think there's too many of them that we expect in town, but to the extent that they happen, it's going to require that kind of coordination.
And Colonel Lowe has had discussions, just from the Seneca side, he's had discussions with them when it comes to graduation. Hey, how are things going? Blah blah blah. But this could go also to the school, to Tabernacle School District also for their graduation or any kind of event they're doing. Something that really, I will share this personal story with the publicly. I went to a graduation in Seneca probably about 4 years ago, and there was lighting in the area, and people started arriving for graduation. We're out on these metal bleachers, and then they moved us underneath the bleachers, and then people were out in the field, but there was no real kind of organization in terms of what spectators were supposed to be doing. As it was, we ended up in the football stadium. But then it started to lightning and thunder while we were out in the field, and they never did any of the kids, none of the speeches never happened. The valedictorian, they were literally handing diplomas out as the rain was coming down. And I talked to Corky Lowe about it afterwards. I said, tell me about this graduation. And he said, well, it's their own entity. It's their own, they don't really have any requirement to sit down with us and say, here's what our plan is. And what this ordinance does, it's really protective of the public more than anything else. That's what it really comes down to.
So if the committee agreed with it in concept, I could field comments from the individual committee members, put together a next draft and follow the mayor's direction with respect to whether or not it gets introduced and what timing. But if the committee wanted to coordinate with me, provide me comments, I'll share those with the mayor and put together a revised draft if that's going to be the direction of the committee.
If we're going to combine this with the parade ordinance, then you're going to look at it that way? Is that what we're talking about?
I get the feeling that's what I'm being asked to do, so I would do that, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to nail that down.
Okay.
Okay.
So Stephen, you're talking about the schools. How do we include the schools in this? I know Seneca has their own public safety department, right? Public safety director. Is there a way, Peter, we could write this to force them to engage, or at least our OEM coordinator?
I think graduations could be listed specifically, but I think that they do expect more than 300 people. And I do believe that their public is invited, and they are public events. So I think they would qualify as a special event as written. But I may amplify that and add the word graduation to make sure it's included, that there's no misunderstanding there. But if you look at the definition as it's written, it would be included.
Yeah, it's covered in that first, the definition section.
And I would hope that they already have, Carl Lowe puts together an incident action plan, that they have something. It's just a matter of having our OEM coordinator and our public safety department having a copy of it, reviewing it, and see that it meets at least the minimum that we're looking for.
Yeah, the idea is it gets everybody to the table, and it forces everybody to the table, which sometimes you need to do, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So we'll review this, and we'll revisit this in 2 weeks, and have a further discussion. If you have comments, feed them to Peter. He'll come up with a new draft, and then we hopefully at our next meeting we can refine it. All right. Okay, old business. Discussion on public safety director and OEM positions. As you know, we reposted the OEM position. That was done Friday this week. And we have a subcommittee of Deputy Mayor Lee and Committeeman Yates. Would you like to give us an update?
Am I still the chair of this committee?
Actually, I think we were co-chairs. I was the chair, you're my co-chair.
Okay. So do you want to give a report, or you want
I
to?
mean, we could both do it.
Okay. Do you want to go first? I can. Interviews are being scheduled. Pretty simple. That's all I have.
We pretty much narrowed it down, just for everybody's information, we pretty much narrowed it down to 5 applications. I mean, every application was extremely good, but there were 5 that happened to jump out at us, and like Stephen's saying, we're going to be scheduling the interviews. As far as the OEM, that's on hold until we see how many more applications, hopefully, that we do get. I guess so far we only have the 2, and I'd like to see a lot more than that. That's where we stand right now.
Okay. You have the ones that came in Friday, LaShawn?
Yes.
Okay. So could you make sure the Deputy Mayor and Committeeman Yates have copies of those? And are we on schedule to possibly have a recommendation at our next meeting?
I'll let you know.
Okay, good.
We have a goal, but it doesn't,
Okay,
I mean, it's.
okay. Well, what's the goal still in focus?
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Discussion Carranza Road paving. I believe I covered that when we were talking about the bond, where we stand with that. And then, Peter, discussion for the Long Street property at 9 Laurel Road.
Mayor, you'll recall a couple of meetings ago, we had some interest in that property between a potential buyer and seller. Just a real quick recap, this property was the subject of years-long, decade-long enforcement activity with respect to the condition of the property. While the gentleman, actually Mrs. Longstreet, lived there for some time, it was quite a dilapidated and distressed property. We took some enforcement action aimed at trying to deal with the, quite frankly, hoarding conditions and other health and safety issues associated with the property. Ms. Longstreet passed away. There was a period of respite where the township tried to be sensitive to what was ongoing there, and then the son took over possession of the property. Conditions were not abated. Conditions were arguably continuing to deteriorate. And so at some point in time, we did commence or initiate proceedings to deal with that, as we have done successfully with other properties over the past. Unfortunately, the gentleman, the son of Ms. Longstreet, also passed away, and the property became part of the estate and is being was actively cleaned up. I had some consternation about that on behalf of the property owner, but they went ahead and cleaned the property up, certainly to the benefit of the surrounding community and to abate a certain amount of those health conditions. And I don't know about whether they've addressed the condition of the property itself, but certainly the trash refuse, we know that a lot of work was done. Whether or not it was done to the point where we would be satisfied remains to be seen, but they did do a lot of work. In any event, the long story short is there are significant tax liability associated with the property. I think at last count it was upwards of $55,000. And so the question becomes, from the committee's perspective, how do we put this back on the productive tax rolls and completely rid ourselves of this distressed property, I'll say, to be polite about it. We also have somebody who's in the neighborhood who's interested in pursuing the property and have negotiated a potential sale, but it would be, of course, subject to the township's tax lien. Certainly, the township committee does not have to be involved. There's a tax lien, and any transaction can occur between the estate, the owner, and a potential buyer. The sale price would have to be subject to the tax lien that's held in favor of the township. So theoretically, they could do a private transaction. It doesn't involve any action by the township committee. They could simply pay an amount which would be sufficient or greater than the tax liens and walk away with good title to the property. Whether or not there would be anything left over for the estate would be a function of that negotiation, that arm's length transaction. That was facilitated, some discussion between real estate agents, and we had a real estate agent here a couple of meetings ago who asked what the whys and what fors are. I kind of characterized what it was at that time. The following week, I got an email out to the seller's agent characterizing essentially what I'm telling you now, giving the statutes and indicating that the township does have ability to sell on its own those tax liens, which could result in a foreclosure. And the buyer of those tax liens should understand that they would have to conduct a foreclosure proceeding and incur legal expenses aimed at obtaining title to the property unless there was an arm's length transaction, a willing sale and a purchase between the buyer and seller. That is definitely the best way for this to be conducted for, I think, everyone concerned, which would be to just essentially sell the house, pay off the tax liens at the settlement table, take title insurance, and own the property thereafter. If there is a failed negotiation and the township is interested in spurring improvement at the site Then you have options with respect to the tax sale certificates that exist for the property. And certainly people that would be interested may have an interest in bidding or buying those tax liens. But again, if they bought the tax liens, they would have to engage counsel, go through the foreclosure process, foreclose on those tax liens before they would actually own title to the property. And that process can take a year or more.
I have a quick question.
1 second, and I'll be happy to see if the mayor wants to have some public discussion. So that being said, clearly the best option is for the state to sell and a buyer to come along and buy and satisfy all the tax liens and take title to the property and do what they will with it, okay? If the township has decided that there is some parallelization there for whatever reasons, whether it's an unwilling seller or an unwilling buyer or other conditions associated with the property, then you have a couple of options. You have 3 particular options. One I think is really not a practical option. One is that if there are existing tax sale certificates, the township could simply assign them for value in a private transaction between a willing assignee, okay? However, you could not do so for less than the assessed value of the property. I think the assessment exceeds the real value and certainly exceeds the tax liens. So it's something that you could do, but you wouldn't be able to do it for less than the assessed value. And again, I was asked to research these options, and I'm reporting, and I'll follow your direction. So I think the more viable option is a sale of those tax sale certificates, an auction of them. And that can be done in 2 fashions. One, it can be done to the highest bidder, where the bidding starts at the redemption value. The redemption value is the total amount of the tax liens plus costs and interest to date, and that would include prior tax sale certificates. Certainly you would want to make sure that there isn't any private holders of those certificates already, because that's a fly in the ointment, because those people have to be taken care of before you can get clear title to the property. They also have a right to foreclose if they wanted to act on it. But it would be a sale to the highest bidder, and it wouldn't be able to be purchased for less than the amount, the total levy, which is calculated as the total amount to redeem, okay? The second option would be for the committee to determine that, well, we don't believe that that's going to induce any movement, and come up with a lower figure that it would be willing to accept. In either event, the township would have to approve that purchase after the sale at a subsequent public meeting, and has the right to reject it or accept it in any event. So I think those are the options. Again, I'm going to remind the parties involved that I think the best option is to have a private sale, to negotiate between a buyer and a seller. That's certainly going to expedite the process, expedite the transfer of the simple interest or transfer of title. But if the township gets the idea that they want to do something to spur it along because nothing's happening, we need to do something with this property, certainly that's understandable. That's your obligation. You want to collect taxes, number one, and you want to avoid a blighted property or deal with a blighted property in a productive way. In a case that would be either public auction for the full amount to the highest bidder, or at a reduced price, knowing in either instance the township committee could reject the results of that sale at a subsequent public meeting. So with that, I can respond to any questions.
Peter, do we know if do we have the appraised value, and do we know that the tax liens, are they over or under the appraised value? Do we have that information?
Mr. Kramer, do you know the appraised value on that? Yeah, I think it's significantly in excess of the 55 or 60 that the current tax liens. But as Mr. Kramer has characterized in the past, there are some challenges associated with the shape, location of this property, some drainage issues on the property. My understanding is it's a triangular shaped lot, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that, location and placement of the house and septic and otherwise is a challenge. So maybe that assessment, is overly optimistic. I don't believe that that's a practical option for that reason. I don't have the exact numbers. Kim has to confirm for me, number one, are there any privately held certificates already out there? Number two, what would be the full amount of the redemption? So we can get that information, but I think what you're going to determine is that the assessed value is over $100,000, and I think the market value probably doesn't equate to that. So that assignment issue, while it's available, I don't think is a practical option based upon what I know regarding the marketplace and offers and willingness to sell already. Because I know that the market hasn't, if that was the case, there would already be a private sale, is what I would say.
Well, the Longstreets, the family was here, sat right in those 3 seats. And they had asked for forgiveness of some sort on part of the tax lien, is that correct?
Because they wanted to walk away from the table with some money. And at the price that I think the buyer was willing to pay, that would cover the tax liens, get them clear title, plus the cost of settlement. The Longstreets weren't interested in selling at that price because they wanted to at least recoup the money that they had providently invested in cleaning the property with respect to dumpsters and other monies that they expended to dispose of and attempt to clean up the property. And again, I'll remind the committee that I don't represent them, I didn't give them legal advice, but I did attempt to dissuade them from making any investment in the property, given my belief that that would not yield a positive result for them. Rick, Joe?
I would like to see us figure out a way to put this back on the tax rolls. And to me, that should be our objective here. I kind of understand what Peter's saying, although it's still a little bit foggy to me. If we go ahead and, or let's say nature takes its course and there is a sale, and there is a lien that has to be paid at $55,000 or $60,000. Peter, were you suggesting on one of these, one of your 3 options, that we could, after that sale, reduce that lien?
You'd have to then sell it again. My recommendation is that the committee consider going to public auction, option number 1, in the full amount of the tax lien and see if there's a willing buyer, which I think is roughly equates to the value of the property. If that was unsuccessful, it would not be a significant additional cost to then auction it again at a lower price to induce a buyer to come forward.
Peter, do they have to wait the full 2 years to foreclose on it?
No.
If they buy it that way, or do they get our standing?
They get our standing. They secede to the interest of the township through a purchase of that tax sale certificate, which is why I can confirm that those tax sale certificates have been issued. The right redemption would include all current unpaid taxes and any other costs associated with the current tax.
They would have the right to immediately foreclose on the lien?
That's my understanding. I don't look at it from the viewpoint of the buyer of those certificates, but that's my understanding, yeah. Joe, any comment? Any other comment? Okay, we're going to open this up to the public. If someone from the public has interest in this matter, please come forward. Stand right up front here, give us your name and address, and we'll take public comment.
William Murphy, 37 Wynn Road. We're on Wynn, intersect like this. I pass it every day, drop my son to school. They've had 2 or 3 offers for $30,000 or $40,000 over the last year and a half, and the property's been in that disarray for 25 years that I can remember. $60,000 is what we offered. I think the taxes were like $55,000. They wanted to walk away, I think, breaking even, because they spent money on dumpsters and whatnot. We were trying to get it there. But $60,000 house, 2 houses or 3 houses down, sold for $40,000. I think still we're paying $60,000, but it alleviates what I sent to. I looked it up as the Jones Act. In 2013, it allows townships to take over properties that are then either put them back on the tax roll, like you had said, or it's kids live in the neighborhood, and it's a total waste. I mean, if you've ever been to the property, I'm sure you have, and anybody should buy the property. It's like you said, it's not. I'm now starting to really think the process, but at $60,000, if it goes in, except it goes to a tax sale, and no one sits there, no one buys it. It says another 2 or 3 years. It doesn't get no taxes or getting paid, nothing. It's under the property. I mean, myself as a resident, I don't like to look at it, and it's not just an eyesore. It's going to condemn before you know it. Somebody go in there, start a fire, could be a problem. I think we have a viable option to get it back on the tax books at a much higher rate than what they were paying with a new family in Tabernacle. And like I said, it's a point property. You drive in, you kind of see it, and it kind of tears down the neighborhood. That's why I'm more interested in it, and I'm also going to be doing the rehabs to it. But, you know, if we could somehow, without months and months and months going by, get this to some kind of resolve, that would be in my interest. I'll be under my 3 minutes, but thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Mrs. Brooks?
Yeah, Fran Brooks, Amesman Road. What's not clear is, I think the idea of getting a property, diminished property back on the tax roll is a great idea. But what's unclear is, because obviously it's not an issue I've looked at, but how much, what's the tax liability of this property? How much do they owe in taxes?
I believe it's just under 60,000.
It's under 60,000.
Well, that includes interest though, right?
Yeah.
So the actual taxes that are due would be significantly less than that.
Well, the lien includes the interest, it's automatically added.
And so the owners are currently asked to waive the liens? Is that what they're asking for? What are they actually asking for?
For the township to forgive part of that lien.
And how much are they asking to forgive?
They haven't specifically asked a specific amount.
I thought it was $8,000.
$8,000.
It was $8,000. In fact, we sat here and said, we even said collectively as a group, as a committee, I think all of us, and maybe I could be wrong, but I think we all had given an indication that we were willing to walk away from $8,000, and we had given direction to have some dialogue between the real estate agent, the owners, and the potential owners. And here we are 2 months later, and we haven't done anything. And in fact, the residents have reached out to me, or the potential buyers have reached out to me to find out what decision the committee had made. So frankly, I want to understand what we need to do to, number one, get this back on the tax rolls. But we've got residents that are interested in buying the property. We gave some direction in terms of what to do with portion of the lien, which is $8,000. What are we waiting for? What exactly do we need to do to get this off the table and get this moving forward?
If the township wanted to move forward, and I didn't understand that they wanted to go, that there was a specific number that they were associated with. But if the township wanted to secede to that request, you could simply direct me to prepare a resolution whereby you would go under option number B under the statute and auction the lien, the tax sale certificate, at an amount less than the full amount due, and that could be whatever number you tell me you want it to be. So if the tax liens are just around $60,000, what was the sale price that they were willing to accept? $60,000. So if that was to cover, but that's what I ended up telling the real estate agent. If they're willing to pay, if you're willing to pay $60,000, that covers all the liens and then some. You could have just done a private sale.
It doesn't cover their cleanup costs. And that's
Yeah,
what
they
they're trying
included
to
that
cover.
$8,000 for cleanup costs.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
The brother
Whose
had loaned them
responsibility
money.
is that? Not to interrupt, I'm sorry. Whose responsibility is that? Is that a responsibility of the residents of Tabernacle to undertake the costs that they had to invest in order to clean up the property because it was left in such terrible shape? In all due respect to them, and I don't want to make any comments about the long streets, I don't even know them, but seriously, how does this benefit the taxpayers of Tabernacle to forgo the money that they actually owe this township?
They owe taxes with interest.
Don't make me start the clock, guys.
Oh,
It benefits the township if they can spur redevelopment of the site and putting the property back on the tax roll. So what is that balance between forgiveness and realizing the tax revenue? You know, the township has that, the committee has that discretion. They can decide what they believe is appropriate in that regard and try in an effort to get the property cleaned up and back on the tax roll. So if they were to tell me, prepare a resolution and auction it for under option B for $52,000, then they could do that. And whoever wanted to step forward and pay $52,000 would walk away with the tax sale certificate. They would still have to foreclose that lien though.
And what does that, what's the implications of that?
It's a foreclosure.
Okay.
You know, the way I say it, Mrs. Brooks, the risk that the township's at is that if this continues, there's going to be another year's taxes and more interest. And it's going to exceed the appraised value. And once it exceeds the appraised value, they're going to walk away, and we're going to be stuck with a piece of property that we are going to have to sell ourselves, and we won't recover all the tax and interest that accumulated over that period of time. So I understand your point, and you know it's a tough job for us as a committee. It's about economic development. How do we get this property turned around, get it in the hands of somebody that wants to turn it around? And
I'm glad to know that you want to buy it, right? Is that the?
That's correct.
Okay.
To Mr. Murphy's point, if it goes on 2 or 3 more years, you collect no taxes.
Well, I see that point.
60,000 is
Sure.
devalued that way.
Yeah, but
Drive
you
by
know,
it.
what
Should
kind
drive
of
by it.
Sure.
Drive rural,
And listen,
please.
I respect your position, I really do, and I understand.
Okay,
I
let's keep
understand
this
because
moving.
I live next to a property also that was derelict for years, but nothing was done about it.
I should
But
add-
the whole point here is that, what kind of precedent does this set? I mean, what stops any other landowner from coming to this township and saying, hey, you did it for the long street, so do it for me? I mean, it just, I mean, there's just a whole spillover to this.
That happens
And
all
these are
across
not-
America,
It-
in every
well,
city.
I don't
across
care where it
America.
happens, I'm only talking about Tabernacle.
Because everybody,
I'm only
all
talking
the
about
towns want to collect
Tabernacle.
their taxes, so
Okay.
it seems to be a
Any other
viable-
comments?
I wish you had that, I wish you took that position when it came to Mr. Brick,
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Lang.
you. Anyone
Yes.
else from the public want to speak to this matter? Okay, we're going to close the public portion. And Peter, you are right. A lot of
What
municipalities
hypocrisy.
do this on a regular
Incredible.
basis in order to spur economic development, to get properties turned around and get them back on the tax rolls. And
Otherwise, you just continue to collect nothing.
yes. And a big part of that number is interest. It's, you know, interest that is accumulated.
And at some point in time, we're going to have to tear it down.
Yes.
And we'll have those costs.
And we've been there, right? We've
Yes.
already tore our homes down. We know what that cost is.
And what commonly happens, Mayor, is to avoid the foreclosure, the holder of the tax sale certificate, if it was to be the Murphys, they could negotiate a deed in lieu of foreclosure. So, you know, but it would still require the voluntary act of the property owner to say, okay, look, okay, you're going to pay the taxes, we're going to, you know, if you were to sell the tax lien certificate for 52 and they were to do a sale price at 60, then you could do a private sale, satisfy the lien at the table and avoid the foreclosure process, which I would imagine that's what they would do.
So this tax lien has, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What do we need to do to get this rolling? Like Stephen's saying, I thought we had, you know, moved forward with this over a month ago.
Well, I was asked to advise what the process would be, and I did that. I sent an email to the real estate agent involved and told them exactly what the process would have to be conducted. And so here we are.
So one option is to put it up for public auction for the full price. And what we need to do is, you know, assure ourselves, is that just kicking the can down the road? Is somebody actually going to come forward and pay that price? Right? And if they don't, then we're back to square one.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, you know, we're going to have to bring someone together in order to get this property repaired and back on the tax rolls. Myself, I don't see a public auction being fruitful. I don't see a willing buyer come forward and pay 100% of what's owed for this property. Even though the appraisal is at 60, I don't think if this was a clean piece of property, they'd get 60 for it. I just don't see that.
The other option is also a public auction, but it's at a reduced price. It's an indication that we will accept less. In fact, we'll accept this amount. And then you could get bids that are even higher potentially, and then the township gets to pick and choose who wants to sell it to in a subsequent public meeting.
So what's wrong with that?
Sounds like a good option.
Nothing, that's option 2 that I described.
You know what's really sad is I've been on this committee for 7 years, 4 months and 3 months and 9 days. And,
How many hours?
well, no, it's very short. We talked about this property the first month or so I was on committee.
But we had Ms. Longstreet living there
We did,
for
but
many years, and then her
it's-
son living there.
but it's sad. I mean, at the end of the day, it really is. And I'm not a huge fan.
And you're right, they were living there for no taxes were being paid.
Yeah, I know. It's just, I like the auction idea.
Would someone like to make a motion to put it up for public auction at a reduced price and what that number would be? I think that kind of gets us off the hook from the risk part, because if a willing buyer is willing to spend more, they'll come to the auction and pay more.
I'll make that motion, and the amount of money would be $8,000 less than what the lien is now. Right, that's the number we were looking for, $8,000.
I'll second that.
Have a roll call, Sean, please.
Thank you. Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. So Peter, now that we've passed this, could you go over the process and the timeline so that the public will hear what the expectation is?
So at the next meeting, we'll have a resolution that will then authorize the sale.
That'll be the 23rd, right?
The sale would then be publicly advertised and posted at 5 conspicuous locations within the township. I believe there's at least 14 days notice due on that sale. And then once that auction was completed, then those bids would be brought back at the subsequent public meeting for ratification of one or none.
Okay. And that would be at our May meeting? Is that, so the resolution would be on the 23rd, right? But then you said it has to be posted 14 days?
I think it's 14 days, yeah.
Okay, so we're looking, my calendar's off. So we're looking late May?
The one meeting in May is the 23rd.
23rd. So that gives you the 14 days, right? To have it posted and have the bids back. And at the 23rd, we could approve that sale.
Assuming there was some bids.
Yeah.
What happened? I can open up a question.
We're going to open it back to the public. Do you have a question?
What happened, nobody bids?
Nothing happens.
The taxes will continue to accumulate.
Township could revisit it again, you know, they could say we want to provide further inducement potentially and revisit it again. And again, that's what I meant when I referred to Ms. Brooks and said that it's common throughout our country that given the real estate values and the real estate market that, you know, towns, Philadelphia was given properties away, not to.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments? If not, we're gonna move on.
First measure.
Okay, we're gonna go into reports. Before we do our construction official, Tom Boyd's here. Tom, did you have anything that you wanted to report on?
No, sir.
Today? Okay, thanks for coming. Our emergency management coordinator is not here, but one of his CERT team is. Bob, did you have anything to report from OEM?
Not at this present time, thank you.
Okay. And while I have you, Bob, I see you have a scout next to you. Would you stand up and introduce him and tell us why he's here today?
This is my youngest of 4, Michael, who's presently just made first class rank. And he's here working on his citizenship in the community merit badge. So he's supposed to attend a public meeting. Right, Michael?
Yep.
So tonight has been a really fun meeting because you guys have had issues. You brought them out for public comment and you've acted upon them to make decisions. So it's neat for him to see government in action. So
Ready for your quiz, Michael?
we'll let Corky quiz him when he does the merit badge.
Well, Michael, thanks for coming, and maybe one day, in a long distance, you'll be sitting on this side of the table. in this seat, right here with the gavel. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thanks for introducing yourselves. Okay, Mr. Guzzi, Township Engineer.
Just a couple of things. At the request of Mr. Kramer, we put together a short letter regarding speed limit on New Road, in particular between Mallard Drive and Chatsworth Road. So we did prepare a letter outlining the procedure for that. It does have to be studied. You know, DOT has a certain standard we have to apply as far as changing the speed limit. So you can find the letter. There's a letter there for everybody's information. Basically, an engineering and traffic investigation is required with field inspection, traffic count, speed study, review of crash reports, that type of thing. It would take about 30 days, and our fees outlined there are about $3,200, not to exceed $3,200. That's to do all the testing procedures and reports, and if warranted, then the committee would be able to do an ordinance to reduce the speed limit in that section of the roadway.
So we've gotten a lot of complaints from the public and folks who live along New Road, and I just find it amazing that one can drive south on New Road and go 45 miles an hour up to the stop sign at Nixon's. Okay, that's the way the speed limit is posted there. Now clearly, north of Mallard Drive is very more rural. There's some vacant fields and houses are spread out, and then we have the recycling yard up there. Makes sense to go 45 up there. It doesn't make sense to be going 45 miles an hour from Mallard Drive down, at least to me. And so what Mrs. Guzzi is telling us that if we wanted to reduce that to 35, and this is not when school's in. When school's in, it is 25 in that area. But going either north or south on New Road right now, you can legally go 45 miles an hour. And hopefully there's an opportunity to reduce that to 35 miles an hour. In order to do that, as Mr. Guzzi said in his report, DOT would need a field inspection, traffic counts, a speed study, and a review of crash reports for them to consider reducing the speed limit. So what I'd ask the committee to consider and give Mr. Guzzi the approval to make this study, and hopefully it does warrant the reduction in New Road. To me, it's a safety issue, and it just doesn't make sense that because we have a general store, we have houses up along the road, we have 2 schools and an EMS building. It just seems to be excessive to be able to speed through that type of miles per hour when school's not in.
So didn't we do this already? When we did an evaluation of the roads about 4 or 5 years ago?
Right. We did all the speed limits at the time. The 25 zone around the school was included, and it was 45 on the rest of the road. Since then, there's been a couple houses added in that section that's increased the density per 100 foot. So that has given us a little change over those years, but...
Well, no offense, Dan, but do we have to give Dan $3,200 to just change the speed limit?
Only if you want it to be enforceable.
Yeah. We went to a lot of expense before to get all of our speed limits enforceable at the request of the state police, given they had written some tickets that were thrown out, not only for speeding, but for what they found during the inspection of the car. So that was the impetus for us to bring all of our speed limits and all of our traffic ordinances under.
Not to prolong the discussion, but should we be looking at other roads also? Yeah. And what I keep thinking of is Hawkins Road, because I get more people complaining about Hawkins Road not being high enough on the other side of the spectrum.
I disagree with you. I travel Hawkins Road all the time, and you'd be amazed. You do the speed limit just in the first thing in the morning, and you see lights in the distance behind you, and within seconds, they're on top of you.
Really?
Yeah. It happened to me this morning. It happened to be an off-duty trooper. And he tried to pass me in the no passing zone in the Medford area.
What about Hawkins Road at the other end between Carranza and 206?
That area's already 25.
Yeah, but I know, but there's other,
Those houses are close to the road. I don't
There's
think
others-
I want
no, I'm not saying raise it. What I'm saying is that my point is that we've had a lot of correspondence from residents about that road. And the state police have been there for years. I've had discussions with the barracks about it. And actually, there's been a couple times where I've been up and down that road in the morning, after, early, before Seneca opened. And I've actually gone out and thanked the troopers for being there. But if we need to, my point is, if we need to spend $3,200 to do new road, that's fine. But if there's other stuff we ought to be looking at, we ought to do that at the same time.
Well, we could look at some other roads if you'd like to take a look at them.
Why don't we look at, see what else we have? If there's anything else we have to do. And we're looking at.
Okay.
I mean, I'm okay with looking at new road. I have no problem with filling the speed limit, but it's got to be done the way it's supposed to be done, right? And I get that. But if there's other stuff we ought to be doing, let's at least have it on the piece of paper.
Doug, do you have some other roads that you would recommend that we take a look at?
We've had complaints both, in both directions on Hawkins Road, on the other side of the highway, on the west side of there. We've had requests to lower it, and we've had requests to raise it. So that's, I've taken that as we're probably about right on that, but we've had...
What's the speed limit in Hawkins? Is it 35?
35. 25 on a portion. No, it's 25 on the other side of the highway, I believe. It's 25 on this side. We've had a request to raise that to 35, and we've had requests to lower the speed limit on Crickett's Mill to 25, north of Medford Lakes Road.
They're 35 now on Cricket Run.
Yeah, and that's been approved. That was approved prior, when DOT had to approve that. That's been existing for a long time.
Is there an opportunity, or do the numbers just add up for there? Would we spend our time looking at it?
We have, the big problem with Crickett's Mill to lower that speed limit is Allenwood sits back off the road, so they don't have the frontage that meets that, and there's a large portion of open land past there that throws off the calculation.
Now, how about Hawkins? Is all Hawkins 25?
And
I won't swear that it's all 25.
Medford's 35. Southampton's
Southampton's
25.
25, or
Or
20.
25.
Yeah.
All the way through?
All the way through.
To Corinth?
Yeah.
Okay.
My problem with, my complaints on Hawkins Road have predominantly been about passing school buses and speeding above that 25 during the morning and afternoon hours. That's been mine. And Mr. Lee was instrumental in getting state police down there for a section of the year, tail end of last year, was it? Yeah, tail end of last year, we set up consecutive days of speed checks on that road.
Okay. So we're okay with Mr. Dudley taking a look at the new road, and then we can...
Yeah, I
look at some others in the future?
would just be a little concerned about whether or not we have money in the budget for this. I think, I'm very reluctant to spend the $3,200 if I understand that's the only way it can be done, that's order of the day. But beyond that, I would really want to be assured that we have money budgeted for this and is available, I guess, an engineering line to do this.
Okay.
That's my concern.
The new road is a township road, correct?
Yes.
The criteria is pretty well developed. We could disseminate that to the community.
We're trying to go over the speed bump at 45 miles an hour. You ever try going over the speed bump at 45 miles an hour?
Well, that's it. We'll look at Chatsworth, you know, you can't even go 25 through there with the speed bumps. You gotta go about 15.
Speed bumps are a little more expensive than $3,200.
Yeah, but that might be a long-term solution for Hawkins Road. That's my
Yeah,
point.
we've talked about that.
I don't know many residents who would complain about that.
No, we've talked about
Do I?
that consideration.
You wouldn't be disappointed with speed bumps, would you?
Okay. Daniel, anything else to report?
No, we just put together some cost estimates. We're working with Doug on the roads, including a couple different options for Carranza Road and some other road and drainage issues. So I don't know if Doug's going to bring that up in his report. We can discuss it at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guzzi. Mr. Kramer?
I'll pass down Dan's estimates on a couple configurations on what you have available out there with the DOT grant and with our funding that we have available to us that's already earmarked for road improvements. We can start with more specific, about the first 2,000 foot. We'll go as far as the bid money takes us and use all the grant that we could, so it'll probably be a little bit further than that. You're a little over 200,000, about 217. So we figure we're going to get a little bit more out of that, depending on how we bid it and what else we include in the package. And then there's the balance of the road. Full width is estimated to be around 400,000. If you were to do half width, just the township portion of it, it's a little better than half because of the what you have to do in the center, so it's safe on what you're working up against, around 270,000. But both Dan and I feel that's not the best option, and it's probably an unsafe option. It will encourage people to run the wrong way on a smooth road going down up in the woods. So that would not be, but it is a option out there to just do our portion of Carranza Road at Chemung Township.
So if I look at this, Doug, you're looking at 600,000 total, of which, you know, we're going to be talking to Chemung and being partners in this.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
I mean, the game plan is that we both go in together and share like we did on Tuckerton Road, and hopefully instead of getting 240,000, we will get a larger portion, or based on you and the deputy mayor's success with our legislature, our senators, and maybe we can encourage them to fund that at a higher amount. But that's what it is there. We had included an option of Powell Place Road. The original estimate was to do it in one section was around 853,000. The combination together puts us in the ballpark of that number. To do it in sections, we're at a little bit less.
A little bit over 8.
A little bit over 8. So apparently Dan sharpened his pencil between the first one and the second one.
And I rounded a little bit for this sheet. I didn't get into that.
Okay.
Most of the times, but yeah.
But if you're looking at just doing half of it, you've got 480,000 in that. That gets you from the bridge to Sharon Way, and then the balance. You look at another year if you want. We are working on the drainage issues, which are the pipe replacement on Carranza Road. Whether we get to the road crossing or not, we were looking, or to the pipe crossings or not, we would look at replacing both the pipes that have issues, one near Deer Park and one up towards Hampton Gate Road, where it goes off before the unit. Both those pipes need to be replaced. We're looking at Zimmerman Road and dealing with the flooding that happens at the intersection of 532 and then again about halfway down.
and we're working on Rural Road at the intersections of Kramer, where we have a drainage issue, Wynn, and also at Hill. Some of them can be corrected with pipes, some of them will be corrected with paving, correcting the paving elevations there, and that's estimated to be about $160,000. Depending on what you do on Carranza Road determines what those options we do. Dan, I recommend that you do the drainage and at least the state portion, the DOT portion. And we hope that you can make a decision on the other so we can put it all together, because we hope to get a better price if we do it as a package and get further and get for less money on all of them. It would be a nice bid for a company to come in and do all of them. They're pretty straight runs, and there's long enough runs in all the locations. And most of them have a drainage crew that they could farm around while they're doing that, and they do the paving when they do the roads. So that was our attempt to look at that. We'd like to try to shoot for a summer, which means we have to have a decision here in the next 2 meetings on where we want to go, or at least an idea what the minimum we want us to do. Like I said, we'd like to put it out as a whole package, and the funding is in place for all the projects. So that's what we have there. Let you know, we've started brush and storm damage collection and chipping. We are running at least 1 crew every day. Most days we're running 2. And starting later this week, we'll be adding a contractor in to supplement us to try to get this all off the street and before Memorial Day. We are still in the first section, and this is the second week we're working. We're somewhere about halfway through that right now. We have been fortunate that Premier North Atlantic, Ron Borgland, has offered us a machine to use while one of our machines in for repairs at no cost. So we've been using Premier's milling machine right now while ours is in for repairs. It went down that 3rd day shipping.
So your 4 routes, though, you usually do those 1 a week in April, right? So it looks like you're going to be at least 2
weeks
per route. So
that's all.
Okay.
So if the public bears with us, and we appreciate all the residents that have gone out and trimmed up what was laying along the road and stacked it for us. We thank you for that. It makes it much easier and a little quicker for us to do that, but we are cutting as we go on any storm damage that's laying along the road and trying to get that cleaned up as we go so that we get through the section. The only thing we may have to come back for is some pole saw work on a few places, and we're trying to get back and get that as we can.
Okay.
Also, I hope public's noticed we have new carpet both upstairs and downstairs. Public Works and the construction office has been working diligently to make repairs to some of the underlayment under the floors. Thank Tom for his expertise in helping this, and we've installed new trim downstairs and we'll be painting later this month. And so we are gradually making repairs to Town Hall, and hope everybody appreciates that. And I'd like to thank both the Public Works and again the Construction Department for their help in getting this all completed.
So Tom, you have the title project manager now. Thank you. Okay, have anything Francis? Oh, I'm sorry, Peter. I'm sorry, I have skipped there.
I have nothing else tonight,
Okay.
Mayor.
Have anything Francis?
I pass.
Okay. Have anything Yates?
No, we already discussed the process of the interviews.
Deputy Mayor? Lee.
We got correspondence about the Crayons Memorial event coming up, in the last week or so. I plan on attending. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. A few things to report on. This Saturday, September 14th, it's on our website, it's also on the fire company's website. Ron Murphy of Murphy's Market has been generous enough to donate the proceeds of a 100-foot hoagie to our fire company. The fire company is going to give him a 100-foot ladder, as I understand it, and he's going to build a 100-foot hoagie. On Saturday, he's having his grand reopening of his establishment from 10 to 4, so anyone that needs a hoagie for lunch or dinner, go over there. Let's get that thing sold so the fire company can benefit from that. So I thank him for that. Also, we have a couple Eagle Scouts coming up this Saturday at Seneca at 2 o'clock. We have Thomas Stone Jensen. Is it Jensen or Jensen?
Jensen.
Jensen and Patrick David Bowden. There will be Eagle Scouts at the end of that day. They'll join the Court of Honor. Also, we have a boating safety course that's going to be conducted at the EMS building on consecutive Tuesday, May 5th and May 15th from 6 to 10. It's an 8-hour course. It's being put on by the Coast Guard, and Colonel Lowe scheduled that for us. So anyone that does not have a boating license, you need a boating license to operate any motorboat in the state of New Jersey, whether it's a wave runner or jet ski or motorcraft of any kind. It's an opportunity to get the license and get it behind you and move forward with that. So hopefully we'll have some good attendance for that. Also, I attended an interesting seminar that was put on by the Walter Rand Institute at Rutgers. And they did a study, it was Dr. Michael Hayes, did a study on the perception or reality, does South Jersey get our fair share of tax money from Trenton? And, you know, I would ask you, how many here think that we get our fair share in South Jersey versus North Jersey?
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm serious. So that's kind of the perception that everybody has, you know. And anyway, they had a panel discussion, and they had the mayor of Atlantic City, an assemblywoman from Camden County. They also had the mayor of Collingswood and someone from the executive director from Volunteers of America. They were talking about, does South Jersey really get its fair share? And this professor, he weighted the study, and when you weight the study, the bottom line he came up with is that in reality, other than inner cities, poor neighborhoods, we get about 5% less than North Jersey. But when it goes to the inner cities in South Jersey, they actually get 33% less, which was pretty interesting. So it was a pretty neat study. The study's online. If you go to Rutgers Walter Rand Institute website, you can read the study. That's kind of like the cliff notes on the study. Also on their website, you can click on by town. It'll give you all the demographics of every town in South Jersey, including Tabernacle. And it's pretty interesting, some of the information that's on that site. But I just wanted to share that. That was last week. They had that in Cherry Hill. And then other than that, that's all I have. Public comment. Anyone like to make a public comment? Please come forward, state your name and address. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor Barton. Stuart Brooks, North Meadow Road. Regarding the shared services agreement discussion, with all due respect, I think you missed the boat on transparency on this one. I knew there were a lot of questions that I asked and that Mrs. Brooke asked that were basic factual questions. What are the revenues? What are the projected expenses? And it seemed as if, those questions were not asked. I get it that this, in a general way, seems like a good deal because it keeps us from making significant capital expenditures. As a general concept, I understand it. That was the rationale that everyone expressed. But I can't believe that when you discuss this in executive session, or among the people in Woodland Township, that you didn't ask the question, so what are the revenues, the court revenues that Woodland gets? Because there's a term in the agreement that says they now come to us. It's just a natural question, so how much are they? And the discussion you had didn't address any of those factual data-driven questions, and I think you fell short on that one, even though you might have made the right decision and a well-intentioned decision. The next comment has to do with the budget, which is coming up. I would urge the committee to consider ways to increase revenues. I wonder what the status of the efforts to make sure that the fees that we charge cover our administrative cost is. I think I recall that that was a goal. I don't know the status of that, but that's clearly a revenue issue. Rent and other subsidies to the TRS is also a rent issue, and I know that members of the TRS will think that I'm after them, but I'm not. I'm simply saying that it seems bizarre or odd that the committee's budget message is to increase surplus, yet the structure that's in place is actually increasing TRS's surplus. And that's not my opinion, that's the statement by their president, Jamie Wood. So I think those revenues and subsidies that we give to TRS to build their surplus should be reconsidered to build Tabernacle surplus, which everyone seems to acknowledge is insufficient. Lastly, as I've commented before, I'd like to know what insufficient is. What is the target surplus? What are you as a group shooting for? What should Tabernacle have in its surplus? And that's a question that's asked every budget, and the professional always avoids it, looking to you for guidance should he answer that. I hope that you give him direction to help steer you to what number you should be targeting so that we can have a long-range plan to reach that number. Thank you.
Thank you, of course. I will tell you that our auditor has already been given that question and has to come prepared to talk about the surplus and what is adequate for township this size. So,
Super. Thank you.
anyone else from the public? Mr. Brooks.
Fran Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. I'd just like to echo what Mr. Brooks said regarding the discussion about the shared services resolution. I mean, there wasn't one microsecond discussion about the financial benefits for Tabernacle. And this is just a failure of government. When people complain about government, there's justification because you have not in any way provided the rationale for going into that shared service agreement. I don't know that anybody would disagree with you that you probably using this building don't meet the standards, but you wouldn't even give the cost, some projected cost for renovating this building, or renovating the building in order to meet court standards. There just simply wasn't any discussion. And it's just painful to listen to this because it's so easy to give that information. And it really, in the interest of transparency, for coming from someone who's always looking for transparency, I mean, you're still underground, guys, and it's really shameful to have to sit here and listen to the level of discussion, because this is all low-hanging fruit, and you could have had a proper discussion. In fact, what happens is the $14,000 that we're going to pay in rental fees, it raises questions about the legitimacy of everything that's going on with regard to that so-called shared services contract. It really does. I mean, why is it that there's nothing in the Woodland budget that indicates that they paid 1 iota of 1 cent to Bass River? So what was the arrangement that they had with Bass River? Why aren't we talking about that? Why aren't we talking about, did they not pay any rent? If they didn't pay any rent to Bass River, why are we paying them rent? I mean, it's just, there are so many questions. Whether they emerged, these questions emerged to be legitimate, right now, we're just nowhere. So you're going to send that shared service agreement over to the county what kind of questions are going to be asked at the county level regarding, are they going to be asking financial questions, whether there's financial legitimacy to the proposal? At least give us something. You know, don't take us for granted, don't take our pocketbook for granted. At least give us something that we can hold on to and say, yes, you guys are making a good decision. Because right now, the poverty of your, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. I may have a PhD, but at least meet some level of substance, and there was zero substance in your discussion. My second point here is, why wasn't there even a mention of why you didn't move over to the ESB? I can think of multiple reasons why you didn't, but there's never been a discussion about that building's open. There's lots of room there. Why not hold it over there? So we never heard any explanation for that. The other comment that I'd like to make is, when do we have to spend, this is regarding the DOT grant, when does that money have to be spent by? Mr. Guzzi, maybe you could inform me.
We would have to award a contract, typically award a contract within about a year of the grant award. So sometime, ideally before the end of this year or the early part of it.
Okay, so can there be overlap in grant applications, so if we haven't spent the money and you apply for more money to complete, I hate to think of
There
that.
can be, and that's happened too. So you can, if committee decided
I know
not
who wants to
to,
get rid of me, but.
committee decided not to do anything, to wait to get more money from other sources in order to fund the entire project, there is a certain amount of overlap in time. Problem is, we don't know when DOT is going to start the next round of funding. So it might be in the fall,
Okay.
it might not be. So there's no way to plan for that, because that's not happening.
Okay. And I guess the last comment I want to make has to do with the property, the Longstreet property. And that too has been a total failure of government. One of the things that this committee has not ever demonstrated that they really care about our taxes, no matter what you articulate. Because we've gone on and on, you know, I guess it just depends on who shows up at the meeting and discusses their individual circumstance. And I didn't mean to be so gruff with you, Mr. Lang, but I'm not interested in the larger picture. I'm only interested, please, I'm only interested in my taxes, okay? And how our taxes are spent. And not a single person ever stood up. I don't care what the county board ruled. There's not a single person, including the farmers sitting on here, ever took seriously the circumstance down on Morris Meadow Road where an individual was getting year after year after year farmland assessment when that property was never farmed. And that goes to everybody's pocketbook in this town. And more so, it hurts commercial growers, bona fide commercial growers who should get farmland assessment and need to get farmland assessment to stay in business. But that's not what happened. It just depended on who showed up and asked for a waiver, okay? So
Fran, that's old news.
It's not old news.
That's old
Oh,
news.
no, it's not old
Okay,
news.
and you haven't
It's not
given
old
enough
news.
time to
I know
speak.
you can't talk about it because you've never publicly talked about it. But, and the fact is, it's unfortunate that this township had to spend $70,000
Fran,
to litigate that.
you have your time.
But,
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Have a seat.
And it's going to
You
still
had your
go on.
time.
It's still, don't yell at me, Mr. Yates. Keep your voice under control. It's not smart.
I would like to talk about the shared service agreement with Woodland Township, and we did not get that one. We do know what the agreement was with Bass River, and we do know their revenue, and we know what our revenue is. And
So
we
what
feel
is it?
that, this is a win-win for both sides. With that, any other from the public? Nothing? Okay, we're going to close the public comment. Motion to adjourn?
Are you going to the Eagle Scout thing on Saturday?
Yes.
Some of
All in favor?